Oh boy, time for another update video. Sure has been a while. Also, just a little quick plug, I've got a new store open with CrowdMade, which you might have seen bits of it before, but now it's official. There's things like shirts and mugs and stuff like that. If you're interested in getting stickers and stuff, I still have those available through Redbubble. CrowdMade isn't quite ready to stock stickers just yet. But go check out my store, it's in the description. Anyway, as for why I don't upload often, because sometimes I get questions about this still, if you're new here, YouTube is far from the only thing that I do. I also run a webcomic, as well as a lot of content that I just can't show on YouTube, wink wink. I'm gonna hope that you guys are mature enough to understand that. When I do upload, it's usually gonna be something substantial, so you might want to actually click the bell icon for me. I don't know. If you do, I'll appreciate it. You don't have to, though. Usually it'll be more substantial than this, god damn it. Anyway, on the schedule for this video, I've got a tablet review, which I'm going to be sticking it in this video instead of making it its own, so that way it flows a little bit better. I've got some general updates coming up. I'm going to talk about Hiro the Dense and the prospects of a third one, because I've been getting that question a lot. And then I got a big ol' rant on critique that I've been meaning to publish for a while, but I've decided to stick it into this video instead of making it its own because I was never going to get it done otherwise. If you want to skip around at all, there's timestamps in the bottom of the screen as well as in the description. Otherwise, pull up a chair and get comfy and listen to the dulcet tones of my voice as I rant over a time-lapse drawing made with the new XP Pen Artist Pro 13.3, now available through XP Pen's website. As far as what I'm drawing this time, I've got a pick of Cecil, the Spider Girl, who managed to send all y'all to Skyrim, and a pick of Pivot, the robot girl who punches things and is the star of my webcomic. Which, by the way, if you're not reading yet, you totally should. It's up on pv02comic.com. Both of these are actually merch designs. The Cecil one actually should be up by the time of posting this video. Not too sure about the Pivot one, maybe. But either way, if you're interested in that, or other designs that I've done, especially Hiro the Dense stuff, go check out the store. Anyway, speaking of art, have I ever mentioned how much I actually love the community tab? Because, seriously, it's nice to actually have a place to post my artwork on YouTube itself. So anyway, getting to the tablet review, this is the XP Pen Pro 13.3, which is a screen tablet that XP Pen has sent me to review. It's got about all the fixings that you'd expect from a modern tablet. It's got over 8,000 pressure sensitivity levels, it's got express keys, a total of 8 of them, as well as a dial. The things that actually interested me specifically about this one was the fact that it had no parallax, so they claimed. And upon testing it out, I found out that this was completely true. The parallax is pretty much non-existent. The tablet itself is pretty thin and lightweight, and oddly does not get very hot, which is pretty nice. The tablet stand leaves a little bit to desired because it's not adjustable. The tablet pen itself has 60 degrees of tilt functionality and does not require a battery, which is also very nice. Honestly, there was only one thing that I had a lasting issue with. The other two things that I had problems with were easily resolvable or were minor things. The first one was the tablet stand just kind of being flimsy and not adjustable, but that's a very minor complaint. Oh, and there's a bit of an issue out of the box where the screen kind of looks a little bit more red than it should, which you can solve with some color correction, though that can be a little tedious, but once you get it corrected, it's fine. This isn't something that's unique to XP Pen. Pretty much every single monitor and screen is going to have some kind of color correction issue. The other one is that when you unplugged it and plugged it back in repeatedly and stuff, it wouldn't register the pen settings properly or wouldn't detect the pen at all until you did some wonky stuff. I contacted XP Pen about this, and they actually were able to send me a firmware update which will be available on their website, which has completely solved all these issues. So with that all said, I really recommend this. This model's only been recently released, so the fact that it's as inexpensive as it is, as well as this high performing, is pretty impressive. So moving on from that, let's talk about some channel stuff really quick, because everyone and their mothers is asking me about Hiro the Dense 3, which I do want to do one. I do want to make a third one. But if I do so, it won't be until next year, because Hiro the Dense 2 took several months to make, and I need to evaluate how feasible it is for me to do another one. I do have 2 animations in the work at the moment, actually. Something small and short for Halloween, and then something big as the next animation part in my webcomic, which is a multi-month animation project. Just keep an eye out for both of those. I can't really say too much about them because I want them both to be a surprise, so I can't really stream them like I did with Hiro the Dense. I still stream on Saturdays though, so still stop by. I just need to limit what I can show, and might show other things instead. Speaking of Hiro the Dense again, I'm very honored by the reception Hiro the Dense has received. I really do love the series, and I'm incredibly lucky that I know some really talented voice actors. I've said this before, but Jello is the perfect hero, and everyone else always does a phenomenal job. One other comment that I've also gotten that has actually made me beam has been, They thought that the second one was funnier than the first, which I am actually quite honored by this, and I get that it's not a universal consensus, but it makes me happy to hear this regardless because the first one relied really heavily on the original 8chan thread for its ideas, which it was actually an 8chan thread, not a 4chan thread. I got that wrong. The second one didn't have as much source material to reference, so it was a lot more my own original writing. That's not to say that I didn't still adapt things in my own way for the first one and stuff like that. Actually, one thing I like pointing out is some of the differences some of the liberties that I took versus the original thread. The original thread of the first episode versus the original thread. The thread originally envisioned the protagonist as being some kind of reluctant or avoidant, not so much dense, and the Demon Lord as being kind of bratty or immature, kind of childish, and also a lot more forward with her advances. This is something that I majorly changed. The thread kind of more referenced. It's felt more like something. There's this one anime called I'm gonna butcher this. Maoyo Mao Yusha, or also known as Hiro and Demon King, that did exactly this. You have a protagonist who is sent to kill a demon queen, and then he's shocked when she's just a beautiful woman, and she just wants to romance him and things like this, and it's a romance anime, kind of, an ecchi romance. I hadn't heard of it until after I released Hero the Dense 1. But anyway, the big difference between the original thread and my version, I made the protagonist obviously a lot more immature to justify his denseness, and made the Demon Queen more mature to heavily contrast with Hero. I also introduced Izalith to kind of act as a bit of a heel to Hero as well. For the second one, or for the sequel, there was a mention in the thread about plant girls versus bee girls and things like that, which I did incorporate a bit to the backstory, but otherwise most everything else I had to come up with myself. And, because this will interest a lot of you, for the prospects of a third one, I actually do have a full script already done. And I really, really like the script. It's just I need to figure out if it's possible because it's a lot longer than the other 2 episodes. Likely clocking in around 14 minutes by my estimations. So that would take a very long time to do, so I don't want to dedicate everything that I make into one project. And see, no matter how successful an animation is on YouTube, unless it is wildly successful, it's kind of a risk. That's the thing that's scary about it. I do have Patreon support, which helps make stuff like that, so that's a cushion I can kind of lean on. But anyway, that is all a bridge that will cross to when I come to it. In the meantime, look forward to what's coming soon, because if you're not reading PVO2, maybe you should start. It's my sci-fi webcomic about a robot girl with no recollection of why she was made and she punches things. I've been running the webcomic since like 2014. It originally started as an Ask blog back when those were popular on Tumblr, but I did a soft reboot of it in 2017. And it now updates at pv02comic.com every other week, so go give it a read. The early parts of it are a little bit rough. Fair warning. So anyway, there was one project that I was kind of working on for a while that I've kind of dropped or shelved or kept digging up, starting for a little bit and dropping it again. And it was a video on critique. I just kind of got tired of working on it. I don't know why I can't finish it. So instead I'm going to record it here and I'm going to stick it in here. Because that seems like a better idea, because it's better to just get it done and out there than it is to do whatever it is the hell that I've been doing. Anyway, a lot of critique online just really kind of sucks, and I don't mean this from I don't know how to take critique, but rather that a lot of critique doesn't really know what its purpose is, or that it's very surface level and doesn't go very far. People get weird about the concept of negativity in critique. You get people who want to coddle the artist and can't say a single bad thing about him, and then there's others who want to make sure that everything is a trial by fire and think that by being excessively negative you're doing an artist a favor, and both of these people are incredibly stupid. For the purposes of all this argument, I'm going to state that when I say critique, I'm referring to an individual analysis of an individual work targeted at an author for their benefit. Likewise, if I use the term review at all in this, which I might, that'll be an assessment of the work based on the reviewer's relationship with the work for the benefit of a wider audience, not really targeted at the artist themselves. And lastly, anything that's a criticism is just a single observation about a piece and maybe feedback on how to improve it, or something like that. Basically, a critique is something you write for the artist to improve upon, and a review is something you write when you want to recommend somebody a piece of media or tell them to avoid it. Both of these are going to use criticisms to make their point, and both of them are very useful, but they both serve different purposes. So, point number 1, what do I mean when I say that a critique doesn't know its own purpose? In this case, and it's a common case, the critic's target audience isn't the artist. The critique is more about them than it is the artist, and this is a trap that even a lot of YouTube channels can fall into sometimes, and even sometimes subconsciously, because, you make your videos and you make them for a following, not for a single person. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with making a critique even in a video format that's palatable and useful to other people other than the artist, and in fact, an informed analysis can and should be educational to anybody who reads it. But you occasionally do get the individual, usually with the mantra of harsh but fair, who, if you start to scrutinize their critique, they're really just hungry for clout and think that by critiquing art they're able to demonstrate their artistic knowledge however shallow it may be. And I do actually mean shallow. A lot of their criticisms often wind up being limited to disconnected technical aspects with no measure of how they interact with the piece as a whole. More on that later. The reason why I made the whole distinction about the whole critique versus review thing is because actually a lot of YouTube format channels that call themselves critiques usually wind up being more of the review format, which that's not a bad thing. And I mean, it is also still possible to critique in a YouTube video format, but you just got to be aware of the whole trap of making sure that if you are critiquing somebody that it is still primarily directed at the artist and not something that you're doing strictly for yourself. Anyway, I'm sure I don't have to describe the whole personality type. You've probably all seen examples of them before. But people will fall into this trap where they feel that they have to do a critique out of obligation, as if, for example, somebody got a lot of vapid praise, best to take them down a peg and be incredibly harsh on them. And this also works in reverse. Is somebody trolling the artist in the comments? Best to be effusively positive and shelter their fragile artist egos. None of these make sense. They are using external factors to basically judge the artist and influence the critique, and that's not helpful. And the thing is, anyone who's ever critiqued art has been guilty of this at some point or another. I remember I used to be an egotistical dick in some DA reviews in my earlier years before I managed to start learning how to actually critique things properly. If you need another example of the personality type that I'm kind of talking about, I remember one time I saw a review on Newgrounds to some hentai artist. The guy spent 2 paragraphs talking about how proud he was for being scathing in his critique, and how he managed to get blocked by several popular artists for telling them the truth and telling him how it is. Only for his final critique to only be actually 2 sentences long where he just complained about how the character's dick was drawn. So when I say that some people, subconsciously or even consciously, make critiques only for the purposes of clout, this is a great example because he literally admits it. And sometimes some sites will facilitate this mentality. I love Newgrounds. I love Newgrounds a whole lot. I think it's a wonderful site. But when you review a piece, it winds up upping your review score, which there is a leaderboard for it as well. Gamifying reviews in this way winds up leading to a lot of vapid reviews that are only done to up a reviewer's score. And this comes in both the flavors of people being completely effusive and vapid and stuff like that. Like, I don't think there's actually anything wrong with, like, a comment just saying, like, nice, or whatever. I actually prefer that more to, like, really long-winded praise, if that makes sense. Something that's trying to be analytical about something that I did, but very clearly doesn't understand what I did. Basically, whether it's positive or negative, I have problems with pseudo-analysis. It's annoying. Anyway, one of the key things to do is don't act like you're an ultimate authority when you're giving a critique. Even the most seasoned artists know that they can't be an arbiter of what's right or wrong when it comes to art, because art is a lot about subjectivity and is about expression, not a math problem. You can absolutely be stern and even quote-unquote harsh in critiques. In fact, some of the best feedback I've ever gotten has been from a close community of animators, who we all trust each other to notice things that we wouldn't expect others to catch. And all of us are really blunt, but we're effective, and we do so to respect one another's time, and we acknowledge that when we don't have a concrete answer to a problem, we don't act like we do. But being blunt shouldn't serve the purpose of being harsh. It's done to be efficient and to save time. But then, outside of familiar environments, it's very important to temper what you say because you aren't on a first-name basis with these artists. Rather than just saying, this is bad, do this instead, which is relying heavily on your ethos, which you might not have, try instead being like, this doesn't seem right, maybe this would work better. Just those simple little word plays can do a lot to make your critique a lot more palatable and make you seem less egotistical. Being stern or blunt also doesn't mean focusing solely on negatives, because I'm about to blow your mind. Good and bad are not concrete concepts when it comes to critique. Bear with me a bit, and this leads into my second point, intentions and technicalities. The next thing that makes a lot of critique poor and shallow is because it relies only on technical aspects that are really obvious. Is this arm the right length? Are the boobs the right shape? Are the eyes too big? Anatomy gets the short end of the stick here a lot because it's one of the most obvious technical aspects. And I'm not saying that you can't use or shouldn't use technical aspects. In fact, you should. It's just that when newer critics and artists, when they give a critique, they often will prioritize the technical components because they're very easy to identify and are often going to be more objective. It's worth noting that objectivity is not a yes or no flag. It's more of like a scale. You can be more objective than other things. It's a lot easier to say, this is good, this is bad, and list things off like bullet points. The problem is that this makes for a very dull critique, and this is why I hate the sandwich method. This kind of observation works fine for more novice artists and stuff where they have a lot of obvious mistakes, but it makes it so that way your critique can't apply to somebody who knows what they're doing. This is why, like, when you're more of a novice artist or a novice critic and you see something that's really amazing and you try to critique it, it's just going to look like a bunch of effusive praise because you have no idea how to tell them, like, what they can do to alter their message or anything like that. So, to avoid falling into this trap, the first thing you want to do when critiquing something is instead first ask yourself, what is this artist trying to do? When you have their goal in mind, it changes your other comments and what those elements mean. You know how there's a whole argument of, it's not bad anatomy, it's just my style. It's a piss poor defense. When you understand an artist's intentions, you're able to identify whether or not abnormal anatomy was intentional or not, and whether or not this actually brought the artist closer to their goal, because sometimes it might be very obviously intentional and a stylistic choice that actually still hampers the piece. Likewise, sometimes they might stay with very rigid anatomy that isn't flexible that winds up hampering their piece where they could have benefited from taking a little bit more stylistic liberty and potentially breaking the anatomy. Granted, this is something that you do have to understand anatomy in order to do first. There's the whole adage of, you have to understand the rules before you can break the rules. Ultimately, this is all the important thing. Does this technical element, whether or not it's traditionally correct, help the artist achieve their goals? This is why the concept of good and bad in critiques isn't as useful. You can still express what you like and dislike by all means, but when you identify what the artist is trying to do, you can weigh your observations and explain how much of an impact such things have on the piece. You're communicating that you understand what the artist's goals are, and these are the ways that you can help them achieve them, or how you can alter their intentions entirely and change the message of the piece. And you, as the critic, will also understand if what you're suggesting has any diminishing returns. The more you understand about what an artist was trying to do and what they ultimately did to accomplish their goals, the easier it is for you to recommend changes that they are more likely to be able to adapt. That is a lot more useful than trying to say like, oh, redo the entire thing all over again. And simpler, more like surface level critique does have its place, and as I said, it's still very useful for artists who are still learning, but for more advanced artists, depth in critique is gonna be mandatory pretty much. And when I say what the message or the intention or the goal is behind it, every single piece has some form of intention, no matter how simple the piece is. It doesn't have to be deep, it doesn't have to be emotional. Character designs convey their personality through their designs. Hentai's goal is to make you horny. Sometimes fan art's goal is just going to be a simple gag that makes you laugh. It doesn't have to be deep, you just have to be able to identify what it is and what they're trying to do. The last point of this topic, and this is more just some general advice for the biggest pitfall I see a lot of critics make, is don't assume what the time spent or the artist's history is. This is largely a pet peeve of mine because I've had numerous critiques before that say something like, wow, you've really improved with a comparison to a piece I did a few days prior. Only problem is that the piece that they're currently commenting on took me 4 hours to make, and the piece that they're comparing it to was a 30-minute sketch. I wonder why the 4-hour piece looks higher quality. It will forever be a mystery. Another example is like when somebody tried to critique some of my animation, specifically all of it, simultaneously at once. I don't understand what they meant by this, but his idea of critique was to grab a bunch of GIFs from anime and say, try doing this. There's no discussion in that, not even any direct references to my works. It was the most annoying thing that I have ever seen, because it was really long and it kind of flooded my comments feed because of how many images he had put into his post. Anyway, these kind of critiques require some massively bold assumptions about what my techniques are and what I'm even doing. I'm a puppet-based animator myself, so trying to compare me to traditional animation done by an entire studio is kind of absurd, and that's not something that I really would trust just in random nobody to make. I would need to kind of default to, again, my animator friend group, because they would know more about what I'm doing. None of their commentary was useful. It doesn't tell me why the GIF should be referenced, or what I should be doing, or what I should be learning from them, nor does it account for the studio limitations or my technique, etc. And when I told him this wasn't useful, he found something from 2 years prior and tried to critique it in the exact same manner, which it's 2 years old. I would like to think that I have changed and improved in 2 years' time. Okay, rant over. In general, assumptions about an artist outside of the scope of the piece that you are currently critiquing are a very big risk for a critique. Unless you are personally familiar with and friendly with the artist, it's probably better to just assess the piece by itself, as you likely only have a limited understanding of what the artist was doing. You can only comment on what you know, and you want to keep your critique relevant to the artist as they are now. Going back and critiquing something from 5 years ago is not going to be helpful to anyone. And also, just another little small pet peeve, a lot of critiques for some reason include a section like stuff to improve on. Generally, unless you're a teacher or you're on a first name basis with an artist, you can leave that out. Just trust me. People are already going to know when they're getting a critique what they need to improve on based on what you've said. You don't have to specify it. So that is absolutely not all I have to say about this topic, but that's all I'm going to say about it for now, because I could rant for hours about critique, but those are the big bullet points. So, to recap. To improve your critique. 1. Keep it focused on the artist. Don't make it about you, and don't try to act as an ultimate authority. Understand that you, as well, can make mistakes and that your critique can be critiqued as well. 2. Tie your criticisms and observations to what the artist is trying to do and what the impact is. Try to go beyond just surface-level criticisms, as this will make your critique a lot more in-depth and a lot more useful to a wider variety of artists. 3. Keep it relevant and don't make assumptions on what the artist did or is doing. Focus on what you know about the artist or the piece. Don't make assumptions about what specifically they did or how long something took if you don't know the actual answer. Keep it current. Anyway, I didn't think I'd actually be able to talk this long about stuff. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. Sorry there hasn't been more content as of late. Keep an eye out for more new content and come to my streams on weekends. That's about everything, I think. Oh, and go read my webcomic. Okay, bye.